Hey everybody, it is late at night and I am Norman. About a year and a half ago or so, I bought a couple affordable old Russian watches. This was actually my first foray into vintage watches, and they were game changers. I still own both of those watches. They're vintage Polyots, and it's been a while since I've reviewed them, so let's take another look at my silver dial Poljot. Because these watches are brilliant. They don't get a ton of wrist time anymore because I have a lot of other vintage watches that are vying for my time. But when I do wear these pieces, I am reminded of just how amazing they look, especially for the price. Here it is, the second Poljot that I purchased way back when. Like I said, I hadn't owned any vintage watches before I bought this and the black dial version. And honestly, these are just really brilliant looking watches. After spending a week with a friend of mine's vintage Omega Seamaster DeVille, I came home and put these on, and kind of similar as far as the elegance and stuff goes, which is pretty crazy given how accessible these are. I think I paid about $100 for this, and just look at the condition it's in. Now there are some questions about whether these are actually Franken watches of some sort, or they may have a different brand's movement in there, or may be a different brand with a dial placed on there that says that they're Poljot. I'm not sure. And honestly, for this price, even if they were, that would be perfectly fine with me. These are affordable watches that just look awesome. I bought them because they look cool. I have this one on one of my Rios Shell Cordovan straps. And I think this buckle actually came on one of my cheap Russian watches. It's kind of a weird metal. Not sure exactly what it is. I don't think it's steel, but maybe it's like some kind of aluminum or something, but it works. The lugs on this look really nice. They're pretty minimal, but they look great. Some cool angles on there. Looking at the case back, it is totally sterile. We have some brushing and polishing on there. And again, just look at the condition of this watch. It's like new old stock. Pretty crazy. And I feel like if someone restored this case, they did a really good job. All the angles are pretty sharp still. Super cool. Look at how thin this watch is too. The crystal is almost as tall as the case itself. The crown is very small. Let's see what it's like to use that. Not too bad, although as it starts to get full, these tiny crowns are pretty difficult to use. It's easy to assume that the watch is full because there's so much resistance, but it usually actually has a little bit more to go. I'm so gentle when it comes to winding watches. At one point, one of these kind of fell asleep because I assumed that it was full and I didn't give it very many winds. Alright, let's pop this crown out. And you can see that the movement does not hack. That seconds hand just keeps on going around. There's a decent amount of resistance here. It actually feels pretty nice. And then we'll pop that back in. And the hands don't jump at all when you push that crown in, which is a good thing. Not bad at all. And look at that crystal. That is part of the fun of these watches, and partly why I was so slow to get a vintage watch. I was paranoid of the acrylic crystal. Back in the day when I had swatches before I was a watch nerd, I always put on the plastic coverings on those to keep them from scratching because I was always just terrified of scratches. Until I encountered Poljot. Poljot is your friend. So now when I get little hairline scratches and stuff on these, buff it out and it's like brand new. And look at that dial. Look at those indices. Absolute retro future right there. I like the way they just cut out the indices so you see the brass of the dial beneath. It's kind of cool. My black dial one has that as well. But I just love these numbers. Oh, look at that. That is so cool. So much fun. Those are actually what really sold me on this watch. And that silver of the dial is just super cool. In daylight, there's kind of more contrast, so the dark parts of that dial are even darker, which is pretty cool. Super basic handset on this. I don't usually like two-tone stuff, but it's kind of cool on this piece. As for the specifications on this watch, the case size is 35mm, the case height is 8mm, the lug-to-lug is 42mm, the lug width is 18mm, and this crystal is acrylic. And I have no idea what kind of movement is in this. At some point I'll open it up and check it out. Okay, so I don't remember the last time I put this thing on the time grapher, so I have no idea how it's going to perform, but let's see how it's doing at the moment. Alright, so it's running pretty slow, but it has really good amplitude to it. The beat air needs some work. Oh, look at that. It's performing much better now that it's kind of settled down. If this movement has a lever for adjusting the beat air and for regulating it, I may open this up and see if I can't get it performing much better than this. But that amplitude looks pretty good. I'm surprised by that. Maybe this movement actually was serviced before it was sold by whoever was selling this. So amateur service job maybe. Yeah, it's kind of all over the place on its accuracy, but I may go in there and see if I can improve that at some point. Alright, so let me take my seagull off, and I'll show you what this is like when it's on the wrist. And here is my silver dial Poljot on my 7-inch wrist. I mean, seriously, look at that. That is such a cool looking watch. I love how it hugs the wrist, being that thin, but it doesn't look overly thin. Sometimes watches that are super thin will kind of almost look too thin. But this one just looks perfect. Yeah, I really, really love that dial. The silver is so cool. And again, man, those numbers. And of course the crystal. Yep, that is awesome. I really ought to dust these off more frequently because these are just such cool watches. Absolutely amazing. So there you have it, one of my 2 vintage Poljot watches. I absolutely love the silver dial variant. Those indices are so much fun. And the color of silver on this dial is so amazing in daylight. Absolutely gorgeous. If you haven't purchased any vintage watches before, but you're intrigued by them, you may want to track down a Poljot because they're pretty affordable. They just kind of work for the most part, and they look absolutely gorgeous. Thanks for watching.